I'm just going to play you a clip. It's from Ireland's radio channel, one of the shows. I don't listen to Irish RTE media, haven't done since 2018, saving myself thousands of euros. But some people do actually listen to this legacy media in Ireland, and this is something that came up on Ireland's national broadcaster on a channel, Live Line with Joe Duffy. Anyway, I'm going to play you a segment because it goes on, and it's the usual attack on the Catholic faith. You know, Irish media like to bash the church. You know, typical church bashing as you get on Irish national media. And I'm not going to fund that or listen to that anyway. But I just thought this actual segment was interesting. I'm just going to play it and give a little commentary on what I think, is the way forward for us Catholics in Ireland.
And Margaret is on the line. Margaret, good afternoon.
Hello, Joe. How are you?
Good. You went to a wedding. What happened at the Mass?
I did. Yeah, I'm still reeling in shock, Joe.
Okay.
I attended a friend's wedding a few weeks ago at a church in Dublin.
Okay.
And I, like a lot of people, queued for Holy Communion, and I was refused.
Why?
Apparently, it was the bride and groom insisted on the old-fashioned Latin liturgy mass, okay? And that's grand, that's fine. But apparently, now there was a footnote in there was a note in the mass missal, okay? And by the way, the missal was 39 pages long, but it says, please note that in order to receive Holy Communion, one must be a baptized Catholic in a state of grace and have fasted for at least 1 hour before reception. Now, I fully complied with all of the above, Joe. However, what I didn't see was, purely because I didn't have my reading glasses with me on the day, and that is because we were at a wedding, and, ladies and their small little tiny handbags, unlike the one you bring with you in the car and to the school gates and to wherever else. So I didn't have room for my reading glasses, and most of the ladies attending were the same. But I didn't see, it says Holy Communion, as a footnote, is to be received kneeling and on the tongue. Now, I have no problem kneeling. I don't mind that. But I do have a big problem with the old-fashioned way. I much, much prefer and have always used, ever since it was introduced back in the 1970s or whenever, the hand.
Okay, so tell us what exactly happened. First of all, the Mass was 2.5 hours long. I'll talk to you about the Missal now, 39 pages, a volume. So you queued up, you went forward to receive. What happened?
I did. I always go for communion, Joe, or almost always. And I stood in the queue with everyone else. I got up to the altar, took my place, waited my turn, and I stood. Now, I wasn't the only one standing. Most people were kneeling, but I wasn't the only one standing. But I held out my hand, and he walked away. No, I beg your pardon. First of all, he put the paten under my chin.
Okay.
And I said, no, please, Father, can I receive it in my hand?
Yes.
And he walked away.
He walked away?
Yes.
Did he say anything in Latin or otherwise?
Not a word, no. But I was reeling. I was in shock. I was humiliated. I was hurt. I was still all those feelings are resonating today.
You were embarrassed as well. Did other people see this?
Everyone saw it.
Oh, God. And they would not have known why you were refused communion?
No. But apparently then I was told, now, Joe, I have to be straight. I'm quite deaf. I don't have great hearing. Okay. So, however, I was told by one or two people later that they barely heard him mumbling something about Holy Communion is to be received. You must kneel and receive it on the tongue. Now, I didn't hear that. Most people didn't. But apart from my deafness, I don't know which part of the Mass was in Latin, which was in English, but at this stage it was going on and on for 2 hours already. We were already at least 2 hours into the Mass, so people weren't exactly standing to attention, if you get my drift, at this stage. But I didn't hear him. That's the bottom line. And had I had my reading glasses with me, or had I heard him say that or say that before communion, I wouldn't have gone up.
Yeah.
I just would have sat there with the others who didn't go up to
And in this
but,
39, what was in the missal of 39 pages?
Oh, very holier than thou. It's just a wedding service.
Which is lovely.
Yeah, absolutely lovely. There's a wedding service, and then it goes on the Mass, and then it begins on page 7. We have the beginning of Holy Mass, and then it goes on to the Confessor, and then it goes on to the Collect, and it has Gloria in Excelsis in Latin. That's okay. Then it goes on to the Gospel, and on page 16 we get as far as the offertory. And then there's the incessation of the gifts. Excuse me if I said that wrong. And then there's the lavabo. I don't really understand what that is. And then there's the secret and the preface. And then by the time we get to page 22, there's the canon of the Mass. And then the commemoration of the living, that's fine. And then there was the consecration. And then there was the offering of the victim. And we're now turning over to page 27. There was the commemoration of the dead. Then there was the minor elevation. And then eventually we get to Holy Communion. And shortly after that, it's the nuptial blessing. And then on the breaking of the sacred host, prayer for unity and peace. And then I'm still turning pages, Joe, bear with me.
Okay.
There's a prayer for fidelity, and a prayer for a worthy communion. And then on page 34, there's the priest's communion. And then there's the ablutions and communion of the faithful. Then there's the post-communion. And then on page 38, it says the last gospel. And on page 39, it eventually ends with more text and things.
Okay. Was it extra long because it was a wedding, Margaret, do you know? Did you feel... Well, you can judge there by the booklet. How long did the wedding ceremony take?
It was about 2.5 hours. That's a long wedding. Now, I have been to weddings in the olden days, in the 60s and 70s, when you're sitting there doing your best not to yawn, or your mum or dad will give you the filthy look.
By the way, did you after your episode at the altar? I know it's near the end of the ordinary Mass, but obviously not near the end of the Tridentine Latin Mass. But did you stay to the end after you felt so embarrassed?
I stayed there like a fool. I was in shock, Joe. I stayed up on the altar waiting for him to come back to me. And I asked him, I just said, Father, but he just walked away. He just kept walking. So I eventually turned around and I walked back down the aisle, but I had my head down low. My head was hung in shame. I was so embarrassed, and that is a major understatement. I was mortified. I couldn't look at anyone. I was in shock and disbelief, and I just, do you know what? I just felt chastened or rebuked, but I said I didn't do anything wrong, and I was trying to say, did I do something wrong? Did I do something wrong? And I said, okay, so I didn't comply to receive the host on the tongue, but that's the only thing I did wrong, if that can be justified as doing something wrong.
But you knew you were going to a Latin Mass.
I did, yes, I did indeed. And knowing the bride, I wasn't a bit surprised.
That's
I
great,
just said, oh, by golly, right, let's pulling out all the stops here. And I did. I knew I was going to a Latin Mass, and I grew up with Latin Mass. However, I think the last Latin Mass I was at was either in the late 60s or the early 70s. I may be wrong there, correct?
And then there was a considerable period, if my memory is correct, considerable period where the celebration of the Latin Mass was actually banned by the Vatican. Then it was relaxed substantially by Pope Benedict, who was into liturgy, and now it's been restricted again, but not banned, by Pope Francis. And each bishop, you have to apply to your local bishop for permission to celebrate a Latin mass. I presume the priest, the same again, priest back to the congregation, celebrated the mass with his back to the congregation.
Oh, he did. The good old-fashioned Latin way, yes.
And there was only altar boys, if any, no altar girls allowed.
No, gosh, no. There was one altar boy.
Okay. Bernie, but 0818 715 815. I didn't know the Latin Mass was still I thought it was St. Audience in Dublin. I know it's not St. Audience you're talking about. I thought that was the only Latin Mass. It was only once a week. But it seems, well, for a wedding, I presume a specific request was made to His Grace Archbishop Diarmaid Farrell in Dublin. We'll find out in a sec. Bernie Bergen is in Newport in County Mayo, qualified as a religion teacher from that fantastic institution beside Clonliffe, Mater Dei, now part of DCU, I think, Bernie. Tell us, what is your understanding of the Latin Mass, where it's celebrated these days? Am I correct in thinking it was frowned upon after Vatican II? First of all, the reason why Margaret could not receive, as we all do, and I agree with Margaret, every time I go to a funeral or any mass of any description, I always receive. I think it's part of the participation in it. And I don't know if I'm in a state of grace or not, I doubt it.
So God love that poor elderly lady who is half deaf and half blind and went to a wedding without her reading glasses and her hearing aid and didn't read in the missalette that communion was on the tongue and didn't hear the priest's announcement that communion was on the tongue. God love her. Anyway, I suppose I just wanted to focus a little bit on the poor couple that were whose wedding made it to national RTE radio on Liveline, and just to congratulate the couple on making a conscious effort and a conscious choice to bring God into their marriage, to print a missalette, over 30 pages. Why was the missalette so long? It wasn't discussed on Liveline. The missalette was so long, I presume, because they printed the whole Mass in the Latin and in English so people could see the translation. What a beautiful thing. What a beautiful thing to do for your Mass, to bring some reverence and love into your Mass, to bring the beauty of I presume it was a high Mass, and there was probably incense and some chant, and I just thought, what a beautiful effort. I suppose that was kind of missed on Liveline, and it's a pity that the person that they invited to their wedding made the story all about them instead of about the couple. But this is the country we live in. And, it's the age we live in, because the majority of Irish couples who get married, the trend is going down, but the majority of Irish Catholic couples who choose to get married in a church and choose to have a Catholic wedding with a Mass today, the majority of those couples won't be back for Mass the following Sunday. That's a reality. The majority of couples who get married in Ireland today in a church are living together before they get married, and they won't be back to Mass the following Sunday. So this is the reality that we live in. If I go to Mass and again any given Sunday now, at least in the west of Ireland, the majority of people that I see at Mass are younger than me, and I am not young. So we all know what the Irish Church is going to face in the next 30 years. The Irish Church is going to face what the Belgian Church has faced, what the Flemish and the Dutch churches have faced, is the dramatic downsizing of Catholicism in Ireland. It will have to close 800 to 1,000 churches, or mothball them, or especially churches that have been built in the last 50 years, maybe decide to demolish them. This is what has happened in the Netherlands, which has saw hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of churches demolished over the last 50 years because there simply isn't enough funds, priests or people to support these churches. That's a fact. That's a reality. And Irish Catholicism is going to face the same problems, because, cultural Catholicism over the last 50 years has failed to engage hearts and minds with the faith. It was just an interesting debate on with Joe Duffy. I don't listen to RTE. I haven't turned on RTE radio or television since 2018. It was somebody that forwarded me on that interview, and you can go onto their website and listen to the whole rant if you want to, because let's bash Catholicism, evil Catholicism, terrible traditional Latin Mass. What an evil thing traditional Latin Mass used to be. Priest facing the altar and away from the people. You would almost think that the Mass was there to entertain people today, the way they bash the traditional Latin Mass, and people forget that the Mass is the praise and worship of God. That is the Mass. The holy sacrifice of the Mass. There is a sacrifice still in the Mass. The holy sacrifice of the Mass is the praise and worship of God. If that lady understood what was happening on that altar, she would understand that Mass was not about her. It wasn't about making her feel nice and comfortable. The Mass is the praise and worship of God. And that nuptial Mass was also the nuptial Mass of two people who are going to be joined together in holy matrimony, a sacrament in the church. It was also something that they had requested, and I think in all that discussion the poor couple were lost. But anyway, just want to give encouragement to the couple for making the conscious decision to bring God into their marriage. They obviously did. Went to the effort of printing a missalette, went to the effort of having a traditional Latin Mass, and the reverence, the silence. And many of us still love this. Not here to divide the church, but the Mass is the praise and worship of God. It's the unbloody sacrifice of Calvary. And so oftentimes we forget what the faith is. Anyway, it's great that this lady was able to find her hearing aid to go on national radio afterwards. Although she wasn't able to hear the priest at Mass telling people about communion in the Latin Mass. She wasn't able to hear him, and she wasn't able to read the missalette. At least she was able to find her hearing aid later to go on national radio. So she's made her point, and I'm just here to make another point. I did publish a video a few days ago about a little girl, a 13-year-old girl, who was slapped, and it wasn't a tap on the cheek, it was an actual slap on the cheek by a priest in Italy because she knelt to receive communion on the tongue. And I'm going to say something that's going to shock Catholics that were listening to Liveline. I'm going to shock you Catholics. Guess what? Little known secret in the Roman Rite, and I have a letter from a cardinal created by Pope Francis. I have a letter from a cardinal confirming this to me. Just a little thing that's going to shock you. The norm of the Roman Rite, still, after 50 years, the norm is communion on the tongue. That might shock people. The norm of the Roman Rite is communion on the tongue. I've checked this. A cardinal has confirmed this. He's issued a letter to all his priests saying the norm of the Roman Rite is communion on the tongue. The indult, the exception given by Rome, is for communion on the hand. So you can receive communion on the hand as an exception in the new Mass. In the old Rite, it is only communion on the tongue. And many people have fought to retain that old Mass because it is conserved reverence for the Eucharist. And the question I'm going to ask the Church after 50 years, can somebody tell me if the changes in how we receive communion has borne any fruits in the Church? Has there been any fruits in changing how we reverence the Eucharist? Has there been an increase in faith, hope and charity? An increase in vocations? An increase in family prayer? Has there been any fruits in changing how we reverence the Eucharist? Any fruits? No, there hasn't. It has done absolutely nothing to renew the faith, to increase faith, hope and charity in the Church. If anything, it has destroyed faith in the Eucharist, it has destroyed. It has destroyed faith in the Eucharist. That's pure and simple. If this lady, for example, was invited to a Greek Catholic Mass, and the priest said, "Look, I see there's some people here that don't normally come to this Mass, divine worship. If you're coming up for communion, you will receive communion under both species with a spoon." And that is the only way that they distribute communion in that Greek Catholic Mass. Would she go on national radio to say how embarrassed she was for not being able to receive communion on the hand at a Greek Catholic divine worship? They only have communion on the tongue. There is no communion on the hand whatsoever. Same in the Orthodox Church. There is no communion on the hand. It doesn't exist, as it didn't exist in the Catholic Church up to recently. There was only communion on the tongue to reverence the Eucharist, to show respect for the Eucharist. So many times we see, this is a fact, people cleaning the churches around Ireland. It's not just once, not just twice, repeatedly. So many times you will find a host under a pew. You will find, desecrated hosts under pews. You will see people coming. I've seen this at church. I've seen people coming away. I saw somebody going up to communion and they didn't know what to do. Just yesterday, somebody going up for communion, and they were there talking to the extraordinary Eucharistic minister. Well, what is this? Should I take it or not? I said, well, what's going on? It's sad. It's sad. Anyway, I just wanted to give encouragement to the couple, whoever you are. I do know the church, but I just want to give encouragement to the couple. I applaud you for making the conscious decision for bringing God into your marriage from the very start. For organising a Mass, a traditional Latin Mass, which fostered hundreds and hundreds of saints for hundreds of years. A simple act, bringing God into your marriage, making the conscious decision to have a reverent Mass to begin your marriage. What a beautiful thing. And you should be applauded. You should be encouraged. It's great to see. It's great to see so many couples doing this, young couples, and go off and have lots of kids. Because that's the real protest for the next generation. Have lots of kids, because that's something that liberal Catholicism doesn't seem to be able to do. But I just wanted to give that encouragement. And to the lady that was half deaf and half blind, well, I'm glad you were able to find your hearing aid to go on national radio. It wasn't a personal attack on that lady. Do understand this is the rite of the Mass. And it's the same way, if you had gone to a Greek Catholic Mass, you would have had to receive communion on the tongue there if you were going to go up for communion, because that is their right. That is the rite of the Mass. And this old Mass, I know what people hate it. I know people hate it. They can't stand the old Mass. I know they hate it. But it's still allowed in the church. It's still allowed. It'll still knock around for a few decades and grow and grow and grow, because it is the fastest growing Catholic movement in Ireland. And that's a fact. That's just a reality. It'll grow. And sure, look, we are one church. And sometimes, it's interesting to see the mass that our parents went to and our grandparents understand that. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. Be kind in the comments. But I just wanted to defend that couple. I don't know them personally, by the way. I don't know them personally at all. Don't even know their names. Just wanted to defend that couple and the effort that they made to have a reverent Mass for their wedding. Know that we're praying for you. And if only more couples did this in Ireland, if only more couples put God first in their marriage, what a great marriage they might have. Anyway, God bless you. Take care. Bye bye.